This is Keys to the Shop, episode 142, the 27 challenges managers face, with Bruce Tulgan. Hey everybody, and welcome to another episode of Keys to the Shop, where we give you insights, inspiration, and the tools you need to grow as a coffee service professional. My name is Chris DiFirio. I'm your host for the show, and I'm very glad you decided to join me today because today we get to talk with Bruce Tulgan. Bruce was on the show back in May of 2017, and we talked about his book, It's Okay to Be the Boss, which is just a fantastic book. Absolutely, go out and read it. But now we're having Bruce back, and we're talking about his book, But now we've got Bruce back on the show, and we're talking about an equally fantastic book called The 27 Challenges Managers Face. This is a fantastic manual written from all of the years of research that Bruce's company has done in the area of management, and this is just second to none. So I'm excited to have Bruce on the show, honored, and I'm glad you decided to join me again. So looking forward to sharing this with you. Keys to the Shop is brought to you by Prima Coffee. Prima Coffee is a leading specialty coffee equipment supplier who curates the best equipment from around the world to fit perfectly with the needs of both their enthusiast and professional customers. Helping you succeed in making great coffee at home or in the shop is what drives them. So if you're looking to set up a great home bar, or you are opening or expanding a coffee business and need to outfit your shop with the best gear, these are the people to look to at Prima Coffee. Now, Prima is going to be at the SCA Expo in Boston, so if you're going out there, definitely make a beeline for booth 418, where you can find Prima. Talk to them about what they can do for you and your company. Again, prima-coffee.com. Check it out. I'm sure you will be happy with what you find. Thank you, Prima, for your support. Keys to the Shop. Keys to the Shop is also brought to you by the Pacific Barista Series. The Barista Series line of plant-based performance beverages are designed specifically for the professional barista and the standards for excellence that they demand. Whether you're talking about almond milk, soy, rice, oat, or coconut milk, its ability to take the heat from steaming, produce an unmatched silky texture, and keep the flavor balance focused on coffee makes it a perfect choice for your cafe's menu. Pacific is a huge supporter of the coffee industry and the barista community. I highly encourage you to go to pacificfoods.com and learn more about the Barista Series line of plant-based performance beverages and what they can do to help elevate the non-dairy offerings in your shop. And by the way, if you want to know more about the story of the Barista Series, you can listen to our interview on episode 136, Nourishing the Barista's Soul. It's a conversation with Deb Kaminsky, who heads up the Barista Series project at Pacific. Really fantastic interview and a fantastic person. So go do that, and be sure to check out Pacific's Barista Series. Okay, so today we get to have another conversation with Bruce Tulgan. Bruce is the founder of the research and training consulting firm Rainmaker Thinking. He is one of the world's foremost experts on leadership and performance management. He is the author of over 20 books, including It's Okay to Be the Boss and the one we're covering today, The 27 Challenges Managers Face. His work has been the subject of news stories worldwide, and he has written for the New York Times, the USA Today, Training Magazine, and the Harvard Business Review, and he's a guest lecturer at many of the top colleges, including a regular lecturer at the Yale School of Management. Bruce comes to the table with the facts to back up what he has in his books. And the book, The 27 Challenges Managers Face, is a manual, essentially, that will help you navigate the waters of management, the troubled waters at times. And that's what his research has borne out, and that is what this book is based on. I always love Bruce's work because it focuses on the basics that we forget because we are in the midst of crisis. We're in the midst of pressure. And it's no different than coffee. If you've got a line of customers and you're not sound on the fundamentals, as a barista, you might skip some fundamental steps about tamping, about distribution, things like that. As you go in the industry year after year, as you mature, you begin to realize that being excellent at your job has a lot to do with the fundamentals and the basics. And the same is true for management. And again, I just love the way that this is a theme throughout his works. And this book is particularly useful and is one that I recommend to every manager, along with his book, It's Okay to Be the Boss, because of its usefulness to address specific challenges that you're going to have as somebody who leads people and is in charge of a coffee shop. So we dive into the 7 sections that these challenges all fall under in the book and kind of give an overview of what they contain. Bruce very effectively covers scenarios, brings us back to the basics, and gives us some insights into solving some of these challenges. So I'm excited to share this with you because I know you're going to get so much out of it, and it was such an honor, a complete honor to have Bruce back on the show. So here now is my interview about the 27 challenges managers face with Bruce Tulgan. Bruce, welcome back to Keys to the Shop. Such an honor to have you on the show again.
Oh, thank you so much. It's an honor to be back on the show.
Yeah, your work is something that I always recommend to people. I told you last time on the show, and I'm really excited to talk about this book, the 27 Challenges Managers Face, because obviously we face a lot of challenges in management, and it's essentially a manual for managers. It's easy to read, and there's so much helpful content, and I'm excited to go over some of that on the show today. How did this book come to be in the first place? Like, what kind of work was done to generate such a useful book?
Well, for one thing, we've been doing research on the front lines of the workplace for 25 years. So everything we do is based on what is now 25 years of ongoing interviews, focus groups, surveys. We have been looking on the front lines of the workplace for what are the challenges managers face, what are the employee relations issues, what do people want, why do people go work one place as opposed to another, why do they leave, what's hard about managing. So all of our work is based on this ongoing research, but about 10 years ago when my book, It's Okay to Be the Boss, came out, and we were doing a lot of these back to fundamentals leadership seminars, which we still do, of course, every day. And then what we would do is come back and do a follow-up seminar. And the seminar was, what challenges are you facing? Okay, you're trying to do this, right? You're fighting the undermanagement epidemic. You're trying to be more structured and more substantive in how you manage. You're trying to put more into your guiding and directing and supporting and coaching of your people. You're really trying to make time every day to manage. You're trying to talk like a coach. You're trying to customize your approach to every person. You're trying to make accountability a process, not a slogan. Okay, what challenges are you facing? And then we would do these seminars. I often would call them problem-solving sessions, real time. Okay, you're trying to do this. What's hard about this? And over the years, we gathered so much data from those seminars that became the genesis of this book. And then we overlaid it with the decades of research and came up with what were the best solutions managers were pursuing to the challenges that came up most often. And it turned out that 90% of the time it was the same 27 challenges. So the other 10% of the time is too much for a book.
Yeah, things can get pretty complicated, but I find it really interesting that through all of that research, both live and with surveys, that everything kind of fits into, or most things fit into these kind of categories. And I guess it makes sense because people are people no matter where you go. So you talk in the book about the fundamentals being key first. Before even getting into the challenges specifically in the book, you talk about how the fundamentals are essential and that there's no such thing as advanced management, which is, I think, one of the things I would assume when I buy a book like this. Oh, now this is an advanced volume on management. Why is that not the case, and why should we still be focused on the essentials?
Well, the bottom line is that the fundamentals are all you need. that what ends up being advanced management is just somebody who's really, really, really good at the fundamentals. And I guess that's true of anything. I mean, think of an elite performer in almost any area. Of course, they've got some newfangled tricks up their sleeve, just like there's always a flavor of the month in management. In figure skating, maybe a quadruple axel is the big thing. And so, if you can do that when it comes to leading and managing, that's great. But there's just not that much call for it. What 9 out of 10 management relationships, what's missing is a leader, manager, supervisor who spends time in an ongoing, regular, structured dialogue with every person who reports to that leader. So at every level, managers are communicating, leaders are communicating. If you ask managers at almost any level, how much time do they spend managing? They would say, oh, they spend a lot of time managing. It's just that most of the time, it's unstructured communication. It's lacking in impact and lacking in substance, unless, of course, something's on fire, right? And it turns out when managers spend the lion's share of their management communication doesn't happen until things are going wrong, until they're frustrated, until there's a problem that actually has to be addressed. So most managers, they're too busy, so they're hands off. Of course, they touch base with their people. How's everything going? Everything on track? Any problems I should know about? They say to their people, hey, let me know if you need me. So we interrupt each other all day long. Maybe they see each other on email. If they're on a shared email, they have the occasional meeting. And what we call that managing on autopilot, that most managers, if nothing's going wrong, they touch base with their people. It's as needed communication, which I call management by interruption. It's email, it's meetings. And then what happens is problems hide below the radar. And then they flare back up onto the radar screen, and then it's all hands on deck. We got to put out the fire. And then nobody has time for regular structured communication. So, it's sort of like if you didn't eat your vegetables and take a walk every day, you're going to pay the price. Mm-hmm. And so when it comes to managing people, most managers are stuck in this vicious cycle of sort of hands-off, managing on autopilot, punctuated by firefighting. What we tell managers is the way to get out of that is to get back to the basics, the fundamentals. And that's high structure, high substance communication. When managers put a lot more structure into guiding, directing, supporting, and coaching their people. They use team meetings for what team meetings are good for. They do one-on-ones, and they spell out expectations and track performance and make themselves available to troubleshoot, problem solve before problems get out of control. Mm-hmm. When leaders do that, that's what we call the fundamentals. And, 9 out of 10 management relationships, what's missing is the fundamentals. And most of the time, the fundamentals are all you need. And if you get really, 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 really good at the fundamentals, then you put yourself in a position to lead at a higher level.
That's excellent. So it's fair to say that all the challenges, these 27 challenges, kind of find their way back to these foundational principles. And if you do them regularly, and it's preventative maintenance, it's going to help you avoid or mitigate the likelihood that these things are going to pop up as often.
How do you stay out of firefighting mode? You got to stay in fire prevention mode.
Exactly.
And that's Smokey the Bear. He's most people remember Smokey. He was the forest ranger who's a bear, the talking bear. Oh, yeah. And he's famous for saying it's a whole lot easier to prevent a fire than it is to put one out. Mm-hmm. And he's a very smart bear, so you're right. It's preventive maintenance. That's the essence of it. High structure, high substance, guiding, directing, supporting, and coaching upfront in advance. When managers position themselves that way, then things don't go wrong. Things tend to go right. People do better, and people feel supported. People don't go in the wrong direction. Unnecessary problems are less likely to happen. Problems don't get out of control. So it's exactly right. Preventive maintenance is the fundamentals.
So now we get into the part of the book where we talk about the challenges that people will recognize as being a part, unfortunately, of their daily routine or something that they're used to. So they're going to flip to, oh man, I know what this looks like, and I know who does this in my team, or I do this particular thing. And I want to go through these a little bit. You have 7 sections in the book where all 27 problems kind of find a place. These challenges are organized under. And the first one is the challenges of being a new manager, which for coffee, we have a pretty young and transient workforce. And because of that, there is a lot of new management out there. And people, especially that are promoted from within the company to become managers. What is the approach that a new manager needs to take even before taking on specific problems?
Yeah, I mean, look, if you're promoted into a new position as a leader, often that's because you're good at something, but it's not always because you're good at leading.
Right.
We don't know that, especially if you're brand new to it. So you've demonstrated a commitment to the work. You've shown up on time. You've done a good job. You've shown some responsibility and maturity, and so we put you in charge of other people. And then sometimes we teach you how to do some paperwork. Most of the time, nobody teaches you how to do the people work. So what most people do is they just sort of wing it. And, one of the things I find so odd is organizations will say, well, people are our number one asset. Oh, well, when you put somebody in charge of them, what do you do for management training? Well, we teach them how to do a little extra paperwork, and then we figure, let them wing it. Follow the path of least resistance. And so what do people do? They do what comes naturally to them. Maybe they do what they've seen before. But most people, they default to hands off until things go wrong. How many people, if they're promoted from within a team, hey, they gave me the job, but I don't want this to affect our friendship. Remember, I'm just one of the team still. This is just a business card. Well, no, it's not. It's a whole new set of tasks and responsibilities. These are the folks who, if you're in charge of them, this is how they make their money, and you've got power in relation to their livelihood. So the number one mistake that new managers make, especially in a setting where they're promoted from within the team, is soft pedaling their authority. They think, well, I'm new to this. I was just one of the team. And they want to just be one of the team still. So they soft pedal their authority until maybe people start challenging them or until things go wrong. And then all of a sudden they have to make up for lost time. On the other end of the spectrum, what some managers make the mistake of, doing the, hey, there's a new sheriff in town act, right? Like, I'm in charge now. All you clowns, I've been sitting there thinking, wait till I'm in charge. And everybody's going to show up early and stay late, bend over backwards and jump through hoops, dot your I's, cross your T's. I don't want to see you looking away while I'm looking at you. You better be making eye contact with the customers and don't even be looking at your device or whatever it is. And that doesn't go over well either. But, I always say to new leaders, of course you have a lot to learn. And whether you're coming in from the outside and then people think, well, geez, I'm going to have to train my new manager, right? Or if you're forming a whole new team, maybe you're opening a new shop and it's a whole new team. Well, everyone's new there. Pretty soon everyone realizes, wait a minute, everyone's new here. But when you're pulling together a new team, that's an opportunity to set the tone. When you're taking over a team from within, you have to pull everybody together and say, hey, I got the job. I'm in charge. Here's why I think I got the job. Here's what I think I bring to the table. I'm going to try to do a really good job. And here's what that's going to look like. I'm going to have a team meeting every week, and we're going to huddle and talk about what needs to be discussed together. And I'm going to meet with you one-on-one and try to set each of you up for success. And tell me what you think is working here. Tell me what you think should change around here. So you want to have a first team meeting where you kind of set the tone. But you don't want to come on too strong. If you're a new leader, you've got a lot to learn. But don't make the mistake of thinking just because you have a lot to learn, you can't be in charge. Like, I'll learn first, then take charge. The good news is the way you take charge is by learning. So you want to learn in that first team meeting. You want to have your initial one-on-ones and ask each person where they fit, what are their strengths, what are their weaknesses, what do they do, what do they like to do, when do they like to work, with whom do they like to work. Try to learn from each person at first. You're looking at them from a whole new perspective if you're the manager. And then over time, you meet with each person, and each of your one-on-ones will start to take on its own life. And you don't stop learning, but the idea is don't soft pedal your authority. Don't come on too strong. It's okay that you're learning. Take charge by learning. And over time, you'll start providing more and more guidance, more and more direction, more and more support. The other thing is when you bring in somebody from the outside, a new employee, remember, you're new to managing that person. So there you've got to get that person on board and up to speed, and do a similar connection process. It's just integrating one person into the team. And, in the restaurant industry, and especially, in the coffee industry, of course, there's enough change of personnel that's an issue you have to take on an ongoing basis.
This all, first of all, seems so, again, it's basic, and it's really important to have that confidence, and also it's relational too, because you're serving these people that are all individuals with individual needs. So you have to have the ability to just enter in, with the idea, being confident that you're going to serve their needs and the needs of the business as well. But the management, or not management, but the ownership, I imagine it plays a large role in being able to equip the manager to be able to come in that way. So a lot of people sort of hamstring the managers with a lack of resources, or they don't allow the new manager to really go in there and call meetings and things like that. So it's kind of a call to owners too, to allow for your managers to be able to come in and not soft pedal their authority and back them up in that.
Yeah, absolutely. Look, if you're on the scene as the owner, as the leader, then pay attention. You need to do the work of leading, and you need to do the work of leading your leaders. Even if you're the top person, you have to lead your leaders, and you have to lead how your leaders are leading. Mm-hmm. But what I always tell new managers is, look, one part of becoming a new manager is managing your boss. So go to the owner with a plan. Hey, here's how I'm hoping to do this. But look, not doing this, what happens is unnecessary problems occur. Problems get out of control that could have been solved easily. Resources are not as well planned, so they'll be squandered. People will do their basic tasks the wrong way. Low performers hide out. Mediocre performers think they're high performers. High performers get frustrated and think, I should have been put in charge. The manager's unable to delegate. So you have to really think about, if you're putting somebody in a leadership position, right, are you setting that person up for success? Are you setting that person up to give you some real leverage in the business? Mm-hmm. And to do that, you got to give them that authority, and you got to encourage them to use it. People will say, "Oh yeah, that's really basic," but then the new manager never has that initial team meeting. The new manager never has those one-on-ones. The new manager comes in and just touches base with people, and they have conversations as needed, and problems linger below the surface until they finally are dealt with. So you only have two choices, which is structure or no structure.
I love it. Your next set of challenges fall under the heading of teaching self-management, a manager's challenge of teaching other people to manage themselves. And I wonder if you could explain why this is an important task, and isn't it the manager's job to manage? Why do we want to focus on teaching people to manage themselves?
Well, look, for everybody, the first person you have to manage every day is yourself. And that's true for the manager, too. The first person you have to manage every day is yourself. If you're the manager, then everyone else comes next. But even if you're look, no matter who you are, no matter what you're doing, the first person you have to manage every day is yourself. And there is a growing soft skills gap in the workplace. More and more people, they think of self-management as, kind of, hey, that's my own style. But basic work habits, showing up on time, staying the whole shift, not leaving early, not taking long breaks, working the whole time you're there, dressing appropriately, saying please and thank you, participating appropriately in meetings, communicating effectively, all of these kind of basics, good attitude, timeliness, these are old-fashioned basics for a reason. And, my view is that one of the things that makes it so hard to manage nowadays is that everybody's got their own style, and people think all these things are matters of personal style. Like, hey, my style is to show up a little late. Sometimes I like to leave early. Sometimes I wear the uniform. Sometimes I don't. Sometimes a customer irritates me, so I curse at them. And you say, well, no, sorry, those things are not a matter of style. Those things are not okay. And very few employers teach people how to do the basics of self-management and followership. Nobody teaches followership anymore. Most organizations don't do enough work to teach their leaders how to lead, but almost nobody teaches people how to follow anymore. Except, I always use as an exception to that rule, the United States Armed Forces. One of them, if you want to say, okay, what's the strongest leadership culture you can think of in terms of employers? And by the way, in the military, they have a lot of young people, and my opinion is young people in the workplace get a bad rap. A lot of young people in the military, and they seem to have a great attitude. We don't pay enough. Well, they don't pay much in the military. It's a tough job. Well, in the military, it's a tough job. How do they have such an incredible leadership culture? Well, it's not just that they don't put anyone in charge of anyone without teaching the leaders how to lead. But the first thing they do for everyone is teach them how to follow, teach them how to manage themselves, and teach them how to follow. So I think there's a big gap in the workforce in self-management. And, you're doing somebody a favor if you help them manage themselves. And, most people would prefer to manage themselves than to have somebody looking over their shoulder all the time. So, I always say to leaders, one of the things you can do for people is say, look, autonomy comes from mastery. You demonstrate responsibility and mastery, and you're going to have a lot more autonomy working here under my leadership. So what you're trying to do is set people up for success. And, if you have an onboarding program, that's a great place to put it. Think of the Marines. They have an onboarding program. They call it boot camp. So if you have an onboarding program, a good way to welcome people to your organization and get them on board, and then that's one opportunity. The other way is just to be really explicit about it. When you're managing people, one way to think about it is you're not out to get people, you're out to help people get better. If you think of yourself as a performance coach, then you're always should have a goal with each person. What am I trying to help you get better at? And for some people, what you're trying to help them get better at is, say, just being on time. The way most managers deal with somebody who's late. I mean, how do you deal with somebody who's late? You tell them you're late, right? And then when do you deal with that? When they're late. It's too late. But so and it's always bad news. You're late. I know. Well, gee, you were late yesterday. I know. I'm trying. Well, how long did it take you to get to work? Well, 40 minutes. Well, gee, you're supposed to be here at 7. I know. Well, how long does it take you to get ready? 40 minutes. Well, what time did you set your alarm for? 6 o'clock. Well, there's your problem. Right. So some people you got to show, oh no, you got to set your alarm for 5:30. You got to teach them how to be on time. And, the bottom line is, if you have somebody who has self-management issues, either you're going to be hammering them all the time because they're going to fail, or you're going to teach them up front, focus on the solution, focus on teaching them how to succeed. So you're much better off telling somebody on their way out the door after their shift, reminding them how to be on time the next day, than you are just telling them when they come in late, you're late, because they already know they're late.
Exactly. Yeah. A lot of experience with that with baristas. It's choose your battles in times where they're going to be receptive to that feedback and where it's actually going to stick with them. And this all seems like a kind of a preamble to the next thing here, which is, you already mentioned it, performance. Like first the self-management, like the super basics of getting yourself there and in the mode to work, and then the work itself, and learning how to master the work itself is something that I find in coffee bars becomes an issue, because leadership is not very present oftentimes, especially for people who work during closing shifts where most management is not even in the building anymore, so no one's there to see them do good or bad. So it's difficult, this challenge for managers to actually manage people's performance, which is the third category here. I wonder if you could talk about what kind of problems arise in this category if it's left unaddressed that could damage relationships and businesses.
Yeah, I mean, look, what happens is sometimes people don't get enough work done. And the other end of the spectrum is people try to rush through their work, so they make a bunch of mistakes. And, those are the two essential elements of performance: productivity and quality. And what happens is, you have some people who the whole time they're working, they're doing something, but a lot of people, they don't do that. The only way to manage that is to have goals set out, to have a task list set out, to have a set of tasks and responsibilities that people are expected to do. Of course, sometimes it's busier and sometimes it's less busy. So you have to be very explicit about, when it's not busy. And of course, you can always tell from the cash receipts when it's not busy, what are the projects that are ongoing? What are the tasks and responsibilities that can be done when things are quiet? Because in the alternative, some people will read a book, some people will talk or text or be on social media the whole time. So you have to decide, is this going to be a job where when things are slow, people can just sort of do whatever they want, or are you going to have ways for them to add value? So I think that's probably the biggest productivity issue. When things are busy, it's a matter of, is there a good system for streamlining traffic? And that's, often something that a manager may or may not have control over. An owner may have control over that. But the other issue is when people have quality problems, and of course, sometimes that leads to waste. If you serve somebody the wrong beverage, it ends up leading to waste. So do you have quality systems in place? In some cases, that would be, recipe checklists. And there are other ways to create quality guidelines, but do you have standard operating procedures and job aids to help people follow quality guidelines? So those are the two essential elements of performance. The other one that sort of hides in plain sight is attitude. Attitude is that thing that's really hard to measure, but also really, 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 really matters.
Mm-hmm.
So managing attitude is a trick. You certainly can't do that if you're not right there.
Yeah, and you can at least try to import a good attitude through the hiring process and as much as you possibly can. And then through the onboarding process, get a good guess for how that is. But even considering this idea of managing attitude, it's like, yeah, attitude comes before performance, because if you have a bad attitude, you're probably not going to excel in your job. You're not going to be a self-starter and manage yourself well. And the manager is really just going to have to hold your hand or force you to do those things, or you just have to part ways with that employee. But I mean, the challenge of managing people's attitudes seems almost like something that would be impossible to do. I wonder if you could maybe just talk about how it is possible and necessary.
Yeah, I mean, the bottom line is that most people are not negative or positive all the time. Most people have moods, and I like to say feelings are on the inside, and you're entitled to your feelings. Attitude is on the outside, and at work, there's only one appropriate attitude, which is a good one. And so what professionals do is, even when they're not feeling it on the inside, they don't show that on the outside. And when you set a strong standard for external expressions, words, tone, all of these factors, these are on the outside. And but you have to the way to manage this is up front in advance. To spell out what does a good attitude look like. Many years ago, there was a supermarket chain we did some work with, and they were working on their customer service, and they found that some employees in the store were grumpy with their customers. And I think you can certainly imagine that in a coffee shop, that somebody comes in, they're not feeling it inside, and the attitude, and then it's not just that they're giving attitude to the manager or to their coworkers, but they might also display that kind of behavior toward the customers. And this can be very costly for an organization. So, to sort of define in this supermarket chain, they made a rule that if you were working in the store and a customer walked by, you had to make eye contact and smile. Well, actually, they got a lot of bad publicity for that, because there were some people who thought that was sort of intrusive to require employees to make eye contact and smile. Of course, you can imagine most of the employees were like, well, what else would I do when I saw a customer? It was only the likely suspects who had a problem with it. Right. But to be explicit as an owner, to be explicit as a manager about scripting, here's what we want you to say to customers. Of course, you want to give people some latitude, but here's how we want you to interact with customers. Here's part of the performance is an attitude of welcoming customer service, and here's what that looks like. So I think if you define it up front, that's better. When somebody is manifesting negative attitude behaviors, here's a bonus management tip. Don't tell that person they got a bad attitude. If you've got somebody with a bad attitude, the last thing in the world you want to do is say, you got a bad attitude. Okay. Because right? You got a bad attitude. No, I don't. Yes, you do. No, I don't. Yes, you do. No, I don't. Yes, you do. That conversation's going nowhere. Right? You have to use describing language, right? So if you use naming language, you're going to get into an argument. But if you say, well, gee, I noticed that you turn the corners of your mouth down and you scrunch up your eyes, and each customer who's come up to the counter, you've said, what? and you said it in kind of a loud voice, and then each order, as you've turned around to fill it, you uttered a loud curse word. So, that's describing the behavior instead of naming the behavior.
Mm-hmm.
And you say, well, here's why we don't want people behind the counter interacting with our customers that way. Because nobody likes to be talked to that way, right? So that's how you have people not come back. Plus, it makes the workplace less pleasant for your coworkers. So here's what we'd like you to do instead. Turn the corners of your mouth up. Open your eyes wide. Instead of emitting a low growling sound, say something like, "Good afternoon, may I help you?" And that's how you start to make the intangible tangible. Mm-hmm. I think what a lot of people assume, attitude is just who you are. But attitude is also a lot of behavior that can be described. And if you can describe it and make it tangible, then you can spell out expectations for it. And if you can spell out expectations for it, then you can monitor, measure, document, and reward it as well.
So you're essentially just making it not personal. It's just a matter of behavior and getting that behavior to adjust. And you're not saying you're a bad person, but saying these are the less than desirable actions, and here are some actions that you should be doing instead. It makes perfect sense because people are defensive.
If you call somebody and describe on their behavior and describe it, rather than calling names, just say, "Hey, I want to bring your attention to this behavior. There's something we need to discuss. Here's what I noticed. Here's what I saw. Tell me about that. Tell me." Most people are going to be like, "Wow, that's so true. I'm really not feeling it today." Mm-hmm. And most, and so, okay, once you've opened the door and you're having the conversation, you're in a much stronger position to give that person some performance coaching. And the reality is you're going to do that person a big favor, because nobody does themselves any favors by interacting with people in that kind of negative way. And by the way, if you smile, you get happy.
Yeah, it's proven. That's right. It's true. The opposite problem that we have and a challenge for managers is one you outline and called managing superstar employees. This is an interesting one because, first of all, the word superstar elicits this, kind of a diva thought in my mind. And I think this is not what you necessarily mean, but I wonder if you could define what is a superstar employee, and how do you balance care for this person without creating an environment of favoritism in the coffee shop?
Yeah, look, well, sometimes people are like, "Oh, you favor Ms. Red," and it's like, well, yeah, Ms. Red comes early, stays late, bends over backwards, jumps through hoops, never has downtime. When the store is slow, is doing inventory and counting money and keeping things clean and going on and doing administrative work. So, gee, I favor Ms. Red. I'm so glad you noticed. How'd you like to be my favorite today? Right? So, there's something about treating low performers and high performers the same that is sort of perverse. And, I think what you want to do is have your store be a place where the ones who don't really care and are not into it are the ones who stand out like sore thumbs, not the ones who are into it. And that what you want to say is, "Hey, look, this is our business, and we're into it. That's what's going on here, and we want you to be into it too." And so what you're really trying to do is help everybody perform at that level. And then you want to find ways to recognize and reward those people. And one way is to give them more autonomy, more responsibility. Another way is to give them more actual rewards, either financial or opportunities to work when it's busier. And, that's a good fit because they want to be busy, and that's an opportunity to get more tips. You want to give them accommodations when you can. I mean, that's the person you don't want to lose. And you want to try to find ways to involve that person in doing more interesting tasks. If this person really cares about the business, you got to tap into that because you want to try to help keep this person engaged. You want to make sure this person knows that you're noticing. And when other people come to you and say, hey, Ms. Red is the favorite and Ms. Red gets everything, what you want to say is, hey, tell me what you want. I'd love to have another person who's really into it and really going the extra mile. How can I make that work for you?
Mm. So I imagine in this scenario, you're also assuming you're having these high substance, regular one-on-one meetings with that individual as well as the superstar employees, so that their performance shouldn't be a mystery to them as much as it shouldn't be a mystery to the superstar.
Yeah, exactly. Look, if you're really doing this, if you position yourself as a coach, if you have a team huddle every once a week or a couple times a week, if you have one-on-ones with people at least once a week where you talk with them about, hey, how you did last week, what's your schedule this week, what I want you to focus on, how I can help you do more and earn more. That's the dialogue that you're having. What can I do for you? Here's what I need from you. If there's no way to rush this. If you're really doing that, if you're really in dialogue with each person, then you're going to build a relationship of trust and confidence. There aren't going to be surprises. People are going to know where they stand. And when you're taking really good care of Ms. Red, they know what kind of manager you are. And they're not, they can see it. They can see Ms. Red is doing a lot of the heavy lifting. There's no reason to pretend otherwise. The reality is one Ms. Red is worth 2 or 3 or 4 mediocre people.
So how do you go? This is kind of a question I think a lot of people might have in terms of this person who's a superstar. I know a lot of people who can be described this way, but they're also very prideful people, and they get a big head about themselves and create sort of a, like I'm the boss, and they may not actually be the boss. They're like entrepreneurs, trying to run their own business within the company. How do you go about retaining, high performers without having them, running as much of a risk of them sort of letting it get to their head?
Well, I mean, the ideal scenario is that you have a team of superstars, that you try to say, what we're going to do? We're going to set our business apart. That our talent strategy is going to be to have 3 people instead of 4. Or 4 people instead of 6, and we're gonna invest in each one of them and make this a team of superstars where everybody's into it in their own way. So I think that's the ideal scenario. You want to lead a team of superstars, and then there might be 1 person or 2 people who aren't quite as into it, and then it's pretty obvious. But if you have people who are really into it, they take ownership. They come in and they act like it's their store. By and large, that's a good outcome.
Fair point. As we kind of go about managing the people and look at our week, and we look at the schedules that we have as managers, it's always hard to juggle everything, right? And it's a the first challenge is planning and organization, and all of that basically is to try to control things as much as you can, or at least stay on top of them. But sometimes there are forces outside of your control that you are faced with, and this is one of the categories in the book, managing in spite of forces outside of your control. So if you're a new manager without a lot of experience, what are some signs that you need to look out for that indicate, hey, you're about to experience a lot of things that you can't control? Like, and I think what I'm really asking here is, how can you tell what's in your control and what's not in your control? Because sometimes we like to think we can control everything.
Yeah, I mean, look, well, that chapter is about things like, well, what if you're managing multiple stores? And so, there are people who are remotely located from you. And so sometimes you have to manage them by telephone and email, even though you want to get there in front of them. But, you've just got too big of a territory to handle, and so you have to manage despite those logistical constraints. Or things change. The biggest change you'll deal with might be, probably personnel discontinuity, losing somebody unexpectedly, or having somebody leave by not showing up, or having somebody just not show up one day and leave you shorthanded. Or you might have a gap in resources. Maybe you have a supply chain problem, and all of a sudden you don't have a supply that you need. There are all kinds of factors. Maybe a competitor opens up across the street. These are factors outside your control. I always tell people there's a very simple rule of thumb. People who focus on what they can't control are powerless by definition. Right? If you focus on what you can't control, you are powerless by definition. The thing you can always control is you, how you respond. And so staying focused on what you can control, your actions, your words, your efforts, as long as you focus on you, then you're powerful no matter what you do. And the real trick is to try to keep the people who are reporting to you focused on what they can control. So the one thing you can make sure of, no matter how much things are changing, is that you control you and that you stay engaged with your people and keep them focused on the concrete actions within their control. That's the lesson of the seasoned leader. Focus on yourself and help people focus on what they can control.
That's very wise. Yeah, the tendency is to also say that some things that are within your control are outside of your control as a way to sort of blame your circumstances. Do you see that often with managers where they might play the victim card in circumstance, but in actuality they actually did have control over that?
Yeah, I mean, there's two things. There's one is, right, nothing I can do. There's nothing I can do is the mantra of the weak and powerless. If you ever hear yourself saying that, stop it. Right. What can you do? That's the question. But the biggest Achilles heel for managers further down the chain of command is they point up the chain and they blame their boss or their boss's boss or the owner, and they say, yeah, listen, this is just these clowns are making me do this, but I'm not behind this. That's one of the ways that communication alignment and accountability really breaks down in the real world. So I'm very tuned into that as something you want to keep managers from doing that.
Awesome. Yeah, I totally agree. And one of the challenges that we're going to have is sort of in this last section here, and I want to kind of wrap up our discussion in talking about this. At the end of reading this book, and I know in the book you recommend that we read it straight through, even though it is kind of in a manual style, I would challenge anybody to read through this and not feel like they need to renew the way that they manage themselves and others. And that's the last section, is management renewal. Describe what management renewal is, and then what steps should we be taking, especially after reading this book and in others of your books, which kind of generate the same outcome, like I need to be a better manager, and make it stick.
Well, there's two challenges in that section. One is when you realize that you're managing somebody who has been reporting to you for a long time, and that person's really just phoning it in, and the two of you have sort of let each other off the hook, and this person, they're set in their ways, and they really don't want to get any better. They don't feel a need to get any better. So one challenge is, how do you say to that person, gee, we've been letting each other off the hook. I've been holding you to a low standard. I'm going to try to be a better manager. I want you to try to do better. Let's try to work more closely together. Let's try to raise the bar together. So that's, almost any manager who's been in the workplace for a long time, you might have somebody who's been reporting to you for a long time. And, maybe that person is a longtime superstar, but a lot of times, people go on to autopilot themselves in their own work and they just sort of do things their own way. But as a leader, many leaders, as you point out, they start to realize, gee, I've been letting myself off the hook. I need to be a better manager. And what I always tell leaders is, first think about it. Do the business case for yourself. If you decide to manage by touching base and be hands off until things go wrong, then you're going to spend all your management time in firefighting mode. Whenever your people see you, it's going to be because there's a problem, and it's, we call that bad news management. Bad news. I'm here to talk to you. There's a problem we need to discuss, right? But leadership should be good news. And that means, hey, I'm here before anything goes right, wrong, or average. I'm here to set you up for success. I'm here to help you. But it's sort of like getting in shape. You got to make a decision, and you don't get in shape in one day. If you're really out of shape, you don't go for a 10-mile run and then you're in shape. Getting in shape as a leader is not about putting your foot down. It's not about going for a 10-mile run. It's about changing your habits. It's about getting up every day and taking a walk and eating your vegetables. It's about sticking with it. It's about when you fall off the wagon, it's about getting right back on. It's about not letting yourself off the hook. It's about knowing that, you don't get in shape taking a walk one day. You just got to keep doing it, and it adds up. And if you do that, if you decide to make a commitment to get in shape as a leader, you'll have fewer unnecessary problems. Problems will be solved more quickly, so they won't get out of control. You'll have much better resource budgets. You'll have a lot less waste. You'll have a lot less rework because people will make a lot fewer mistakes, and that also cuts down on waste. You'll get rid of those low performers who are just soaking up a paycheck and causing problems for everybody else and making everybody else think that low performance is an option. Everybody will do better. Everybody will want to be, hey, working here means you're into it. Working here means you're a superstar who's into it. And then managing becomes just trying to help people stay on that path. So it's a contact sport. It's leadership matters. Leadership is not a little footnote and you do some paperwork. Leadership is the people work. And the people work makes a difference. And, in terms of just an equation for an owner, you have one really good manager who does this, and you can get away with 3 staff instead of 4. You can get away with fewer people who are doing more work and better. You can pay them better. You can give them more flexibility. 6 people instead of 8. Whatever it is, that's the formula. One good person is worth more than 2 mediocre people.
Well, I really appreciate you taking time to talk with us today and look through all of these sections of the book. And there's so much more to dive into. And I would encourage anybody listening to get this book, The 27 Challenges That Managers Face. How can we stay in contact with you and what you're doing with Rainmaker Thinking?
Well, rainmakerthinking.com is a great place to find me, or at Bruce Tulgan on Twitter, or I'm on LinkedIn, of course, and I'm easy to stay in touch with. Rainmakerthinking.com is probably the easiest way to find me.
Excellent. Thank you again for joining us on the show a second time. Always a pleasure.
Thank you.
I appreciate your wisdom.
Thanks so much for having me. It's an honor.
Well, one of the things that I feel is critical to walk away from when it comes to this interview with Bruce and this book is his comment, both in this interview and in his book, that there is no such thing as advanced management. There's only various situations where you apply fundamental skills. And in the midst of those situations where you feel like the challenge you're facing requires something more than what you've already known, then those are the times where you need to dig deeper into the basics to see when and where and how you've applied them. And had you applied them differently, would it have turned out differently? The solution is often pretty simple, and it can seem like a complex situation requires a complex answer. But what Bruce says and what his work has borne out over the years is that really comes down to those fundamental basic management skills, then those challenges start to become less challenging. This book not only reminds you of the basics, but it also is a step-by-step guide. So each one of the challenges that Bruce addresses in this book has a particular prescription for how to overcome that challenge. So I would highly recommend you go out and get this book, The 27 Challenges Managers Face. Now, we're going to be running a giveaway for this book. Bruce and Rainmaker Thinking have generously agreed to give away 3 signed copies of the 27 Challenges Managers Face. Just check the Instagram post of this episode for details about how to enter and when we'll be making the announcement for the winners. Now, if you want to reach out to me, it's chris@keystotheshop.com. That's CHRIS@keystotheshop.com. If you have any questions, comments, or feedback, or want to talk about possibly working with Keys to the Shop Consulting to help you in some challenges that your business is facing, just use that email, chris@keystotheshop.com. Thank you so much for joining me. I appreciate all of you. Have an amazing week. And as always, I hope that this episode has truly given you keys to the shop.